Welcome ladies and gents, Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter, or of course you can subscribe to the channel Let's Talk Boxing. I want us to delve into the Tyson Fury Oleksandr Usyk saga. I'd lost my voice earlier this week, and this is why there's a delay in me bringing this video to you. I'm seeing things a little bit differently than the majority of people. I do not necessarily agree with the narrative that is prevailing at the moment, that this is solely Tyson Fury's fault. Make no mistake, I will not be absolving Fury of any responsibility. In other words, what I'm going to be doing here is putting both men on trial individually and saying, did each guy do their utmost to make the fight occur at every stage of the negotiation process? In my opinion, neither man did everything they could at every stage of the process. I think initially Oleksandr Usyk was doing his utmost to make the fight happen, but then something very specific happened, and I think that made Oleksandr Usyk change his course, and I'm going to talk about that defining moment in this whole process later on in the video. But just because I'll be critical of Usyk, that is not some sort of excuse to back Fury. But please listen to the specifics of the argument that I'm making. There's nothing more boring than people accusing you of being biased when they haven't bothered to watch the videos or even understand the points that you're making, and they make assumptions as to some sort of an agenda because they're projecting. It's very dull. The vast majority of my subscribers are nothing like that, of course, but please do not see this as a binary issue of taking one or the other side. It's got nothing to do with that. We're putting both men on separate trials. So let's get to this. We'll start off with putting Tyson Fury on trial, so to speak. This one's quite straightforward, to be honest with you, because the truth is, he hasn't done everything that he could to make the fight occur from the beginning. We know that Tyson Fury can be difficult. We know that Fury can make statements and contradict them the very next minute. He's very difficult to deal with. We also know that he's greedy. This is just a fact. We saw it in the negotiations with Dillian Whyte, and we saw that Bob Arum spoke about 50-50 being fair. So then when Tyson Fury asked for 70%, I was saying this looks like he's trying to price himself out of the fight. Nonetheless, Oleksandr Usyk agreed to it. That shows that Oleksandr Usyk was willing to jump over hurdles. There were rumours that he was very difficult in negotiations with the Saudis as well, too greedy, which could have jeopardised the fight there. There were issues with the dates. Initially, the fight was meant to be in March, then it got pushed back to the end of April, and then from the end of April, people were saying that he might not even be fit enough for that, and the fight would need to be moved again. So Fury's been very difficult in multiple aspects. The only area where I felt he was unfairly criticised is where people were saying that he was demanding the rematch clause be taken out, and that was yet another obstacle. This is not true. They had agreed terms for the first fight by this point, and he put out a video to say, how about we get rid of the rematch? Usyk said it was your idea to put in the rematch. In other words, nope, I'm not asking for that. And at no point did Fury bring it up again. It wasn't a demand, it wasn't a condition, it was a suggestion. But all other aspects up to this point, he's been very difficult in general. And so to me, Fury on the trial as to whether he did his utmost to make the fight occur, absolutely not. I can categorically say he's guilty of not doing everything he could to make the fight happen. However, let's fast forward to when the fight fell apart. Egis Klimas had informed Steve Kim that the fight was not going to take place, and Steve Kim informed the world. Now, at this point, everybody was disappointed. Everybody was blaming Tyson Fury, but we'd yet to really get any information come out as to why. Later on, ID Boxing put out a tweet to say that the reason was that they had problems with agreeing the split terms for the rematch. Again, everybody blaming Tyson Fury. I'm reserving judgment. I want to know what has happened here. What are the demands from both sides? Okay, there's a problem with the splits. If Tyson Fury's come out and he said, I want 60%, I want 70%, even if I lose the first fight, well then Tyson Fury is quite clearly building on the fact that he's been a problem up to now, and he's continuing to do that, and clearly he did not want the fight. But if Usyk has made unreasonable demands, then we have to come out and say so as well. So I'm reserving judgment. So when the two promoters, Krassyuk and Warren, went on to talk sport, it's Krassyuk that is invited on and speaks first. He says that they've been disrespected, but to explain all the reasons why the fight fell apart, he'd need 15 minutes to explain everything. Now, that's not an answer. So when Frank Warren was about to go on, I'm tweeting away, Simon Jordan, you have to ask, what are the splits that each side demanded? The rest of the public are sitting there jumping on Tyson Fury's back. I'm reserving judgment. And when Simon Jordan asked whether the splits for the rematch would be fair, Frank Warren was explaining that Tyson Fury is the A side, and that actually Oleksandr Usyk would be still earning a higher payday than he's ever earned before. And at this stage, this is the tweet I put out. For all the numbskulls out there that tried to accuse me of being biased, Frank Warren's not being specific on the rematch split demands, but says Fury is the A-side, and then he's speaking of Usyk's overall pay as being higher than ever before. So what, Frank? That's not a percentage cut. That's given my answer as to who is at fault. Great job, Simon Jordan. Hence, to all intents and purposes, as far as I'm concerned, the trial is over at this point. Tyson Fury, as we've established, is guilty. Oleksandr Usyk is innocent of trying to stop the fight happening. I had no idea further information would then emerge, but it did emerge, didn't it? And it would be biased of me to then not change my perspective when new information arose. So let's consider that new information by putting Oleksandr Usyk on trial. Mike Coppinger then released further information on the matter, and he explained that if Oleksandr Usyk was to win the first fight, he would want 70-30 for the split for the second, whilst Tyson Fury was pushing for 50-50. If Fury had won the first fight, Fury would still want 70-30, and if a rematch took place in the Middle East, each side would do its own deal. Well, now this changes things, doesn't it? Nobody expected to see those sorts of split numbers. I certainly didn't, and I know that even the critics of Tyson Fury didn't. Even the anti-Fury crowd were saying things online like, oh, I bet you Tyson Fury wants the higher split even if he was to lose the first fight. He's asking for 60% or 70%. Nobody was expecting that the sticking point would be Usyk demanding 70%. Now, this does not take away from the fact that 70% for Fury in the first fight was too wide. But that had been agreed. That's been an obstacle that's been bypassed. At this point of the negotiation, at this new juncture, it is Oleksandr Usyk that's putting out a number which is too wide. And I know since then, Krasyuk has come out and he said Usyk only accepted 70-30 because in his mind, he would have got 70-30 as a reverse split. What does that even mean in his mind? You didn't agree that. You didn't demand that. When you put out a public statement to say you would accept 70-30, the condition was if Tyson Fury gives £1 million to the Ukrainian cause. There was nothing said about, okay, Tyson, I'll accept your offer on the condition that you give £1 million to the Ukrainian cause, and additionally to that, when I beat you in the first fight, I want the 70% in the second fight. That wasn't said. Krasyuk didn't say it in any interviews. All of a sudden, this thing has emerged. But the fact of the matter is, if there was no agreement, and as far as I can see, there didn't seem to be an agreement that this would be the case, they began to negotiate the purse splits after the purse splits for the first fight, it seems, then 70-30 Usyk is far too wide, particularly when a rematch is often worth more than the first fight. They could end up finishing 1-1, right? Usyk wins the first fight, Fury wins the second, and Usyk makes more money than the cash cow. It's just unrealistic. So, anything between 50-50, which is what Fury was demanding, and 60-40 seems fair to me. However, as I said in the tweet, for those that were saying I was biased, because Usyk made the concession for the first fight, he deserves a 60% split. But 70%, that's just a problem. You're putting an obstacle in there. And with that in mind, I implore you to go and check out Eddie Hearn's IFL interview on this matter hours after I put out my own tweet. Because everything he said mirrors everything I had said. I'm going to quote you a few sections here. There are a lot of similarities between this process and what happened with AJ. In that process, we were asked to accept something that Fury felt we wouldn't accept. We asked for December 18th. They said December the 3rd or no fight. AJ said, let's do it. We then went back and said, it's on. And then we saw on the social media stuff and everything broke down. Unquote. So up to this point, he's directly in line with what I'm saying and what I have been saying, that Tyson Fury was difficult in the negotiations with Anthony Joshua, and he's being difficult in the early stages of the negotiations with Oleksandr Usyk. Eddie Hearn goes on to say, in this case, there is no way that Tyson Fury believed they'd take 30%. You have to give Usyk unbelievable props for taking 30%. 60-40, I think, was the right split. By bluff or by genius, he got a great deal. Unquote. Now, I was saying 50-50 would have been fairer. Hearn thinks 60-40 is probably fairer. Either way, either split I think is fine. And as you can see, Eddie Hearn is still aligned with my position, and you certainly wouldn't call Eddie Hearn biased towards Tyson Fury. Then we carry on with Eddie Hearn's comments. Quote, both parties would probably want the rematch. The first fight with AJ was 70-30 and the rematch was 50-50. But when you say take a split that's unfair, that's the move. You say, I'll take 70-30, but if I win, I want 70-30 in the rematch. but I actually disagree with Usyk. I understand it because he shouldn't be taking 70-30 in the first place, but the rematch of a 70-30 fight is unusually reversed. It would really emphasize that there's a significant A-side in the first fight at 70-30, so you'd rarely swing it the other way and reverse the splits. I feel like 50-50 is probably not fair because of the fight's first split, but 60-40 for Oleksandr Usyk would be very fair for the rematch. Unquote. Is that not an exact mirroring of what it is that I've been saying? So why are people suddenly now saying you're shilling for Tyson Fury? Is Eddie Hearn a fanboy? Don't tell me that Oleksandr Usyk's sudden demand of 70-30 is not extreme. I will get to why I think, though, that this has happened. There is a reason, there is a catalyst for this. But before I get to that, let me just finish off with another comment that Eddie Hearn said. I quote, "I think they might get there. I don't feel like it will happen on April the 29th, though. I never have done. It's 5 weeks on Saturday. It's actually probably detrimental to the fight it happening on the 29th, in all honesty, but you never know with Fury." Now, that goes back to other comments I'd made in previous videos where I've been saying, guys, I actually have no problem with the fight being pushed back because I want both fighters to be at their absolute best. Yet Krassyuk was saying that the reason that Tyson Fury did not want to take the fight was because he couldn't possibly be ready for April 29th. And because it wasn't sufficient enough time to be physically ready for an undisputed title fight, Fury was trying to delay. Additionally to that, if they're going to push the fight back, then it would be 50-50. Well, that's not conducive to wanting to make the fight either, is it? Because then what you're saying is, Tyson, I know you can't be ready. So we either want a weakened version of you. Otherwise, from what we've agreed, that 70-30 split, you're going to have to pay a massive fine. And when we're talking about massive fine here, let's say for argument's sake, Fury is making 60 million. If there is a 20% swing that he needs to give up from that, you're talking about him paying 12 million. To what? Push the fight back by 5 weeks, say, to June the 3rd for argument's sake? Come on now. That's never going to happen. That's an unrealistic demand. Now, this is what I mean, though, about not fanboying. This does not absolve Tyson Fury of responsibility. You should have been ready for April 29th. You've had long enough. And additionally to that, you didn't even have any sparring partners in that are southpaws. What's going on with your trainer? He's expecting to come and train a collie for the light fight and then go back. So it's not as though Tyson Fury's sitting there thinking, yeah, we're definitely ready to go for the 29th. At least it doesn't appear that way from where I'm sitting. But the point is, Oleksandr Usyk had him in a corner. That was a checkmate moment for Oleksandr Usyk. And instead of seeing it through and saying, okay, give me 60-40, he's demanded 70-30 and given Tyson Fury a way out potentially. So nobody's sitting here absolving Fury of responsibility, but don't tell me that Oleksandr Usyk's team have been saintly here and they've done their utmost to make the fight happen. And just to show you that 70-30 is unreasonable, when Tony Bellew fought Oleksandr Usyk was the undisputed cruiserweight champion. Tony Bellew was reported to have pocketed 4 million, Oleksandr Usyk 837,600. So Tony Bellew would have got roughly 80% of the split. And that's not a one-time thing either. Initially, Chisora was going to earn 6.9 million and Usyk's supposed take-home money was 2.2 million. That would have been 31% to Oleksandr Usyk. Because there were measures put in place, they shut the world down, they got less. And Chisora was guaranteed 4 million and Usyk was guaranteed 1.5 million and he ended up getting 2 million. But the guarantees is what counted. Chisora's also went up because it was based on the pay-per-view. And the fact of the matter is he got 37.5%. Oleksandr Usyk to fight Derek Chisora. This should tell you that it's not about who's decorated. The fact of the matter is, whether you agree with it or not, the guy that brings the money gets more of the cut. Tyson Fury is a massive star compared to Oleksandr Usyk. He's a big star in the UK, he's a big star in the US, and Oleksandr Usyk, you have to understand something else as well, for those of you that understand geopolitics. A massive chunk of his fan base has been lost, because Usyk was loved by a lot of Russian fans. In fact, there were a lot of Ukrainian fans that weren't quite as keen on Oleksandr Usyk, because in the past he was actually seen as pro-Russian. And now that he's taken a completely different stance, politically speaking, an awful lot of his fan base has left him. That's just the reality of how it is, guys. Again, it's nothing to do with what's right and what's wrong, what's just and what's unjust. And to the crowd out there that are pretending that Tyson Fury is not actually a big star in the UK, and that you can look at the fact that Oleksandr Usyk has sold more pay-per-views in the UK than Tyson Fury has, come on, man. This is just spin. First and foremost, Oleksandr Usyk sold these pay-per-views because he was fighting other British pay-per-view stars. If you were to get both guys to fight a non-Brit, let's say both Usyk and Fury were to fight Hrgovic, who do you think would sell more pay-per-views in the UK? Additionally to that, let's not forget that Deontay Wilder's fights against Tyson Fury were all on the West Coast in the United States. They're on at 5 a.m. over here in this country. You can't sit there and look at those numbers and say, well, they didn't have the same numbers as Chisora Usyk, which was on at prime time here in the UK. It's a ridiculous comment to make. They're incomparable situations. As for the Dillian Whyte fight, we never had those numbers released, but Warren did suggest that he was expecting 1.5 million. Let's say that's been greatly exaggerated by a third. That would still be 1 million pay-per-view buys. As for Chisora, according to Frank Warren, it did over 500,000 buys. That to me is mad, considering it was Derek Chisora, a fight nobody wanted to see, because Chisora now is washed up. It's not the Chisora that fought Oleksandr Usyk. Nobody wanted to see that fight. And the price point for the pay-per-view was the joint most expensive in the history of British boxing. So let's not pretend that Tyson Fury is not a star here in the UK and Oleksandr Usyk somehow is, because he's been involved in some big fights here when he was the visiting fighter. Let's not pretend that in the Western market in particular, there isn't a massive gap between the A side and the B side in this particular fight. This is just how splits work. So why did this occur? Did Oleksandr Usyk want to duck Tyson Fury, as some Tyson Fury fans are saying? He never really wanted to fight? That's rubbish. If he never really wanted to fight, he wouldn't have made the concessions he was making early on. But I want you to go and look at this particular video with seconds out. Alex Krasuk says that at one point, Oleksandr Usyk just turned to him and said, "Alex, why must I always bow my head? No, I will not do this anymore." And that means pride came into it, not just business. But why would pride come into this? Do you remember when Tyson Fury put out that story where he's calling Krasuk the worst manager in history? You got your fight at 30%, you bum dosser and all of that. Fury himself realizes that 70-30 was too wide, and he embarrassed Krasuk and Usyk. That was a very stupid move from Tyson Fury. And I'm going to give you an analogy to explain what I think has happened here. Imagine you have a real obsession with mobile phones, and a brand new mobile phone comes out. It looks beautiful. It's got so many gadgetry capabilities that you could barely dream of. You could contact the Martians with this thing. It is incredible, and you have to have it. You go and look in Argos catalogue, it says £1,000. £1,000, you can't afford that. Anyway, on your way home every single day, you're so obsessed with this phone, you stop at the local phone store, press your nose up against the shop window, start steaming it up as you're yearning for this phone. You just look at that price tag and you think, you know what, I just can't justify it. But lo and behold, one day you leave work, you see a for sale sign, you can't believe it. £700, 30% off. This is an amazing opportunity. You cannot wait. It's a lot of money, but you really need that phone. You walk into the store, you're in two minds. Should I really part with this? And this charming salesman comes over and he's selling you this phone. Best phone ever, and you'll never find it cheaper anywhere else. You know what? He entices you. You buy the phone, you walk out, you're treading on water, you're over the moon. You are so happy to have this mobile phone that you're making phone calls you don't even need to make. You can't wait to go out later on that night to meet up with your friends just to show them the phone. So when you do go out to the local bar and you see the salesman sitting on the table next to you, you can't believe it. This is the guy that sold me this phone, guys. Check this out. How cool is this? Well, they tell you, oh, that's, yeah, lovely phone. How much did you get it for? You say £700. I got it on offer. And they all start laughing at you. You got it on offer. You do realise the store across the street has it for half price. You could have got this phone for £500. The salesman hears your conversation and he starts laughing directly in your face. Well, now all of a sudden things change for you, don't they? You were happy to give up that £700. So it's not that you've lost that extra 200. You walked out treading on water, so happy. You were happy to part with what you parted with. But the fact that you got bumped, the principle of that winds you up. The fact that the salesman would laugh in your face, it winds you up. And something like that is what I believe has happened to Oleksandr Usyk. How dare you take advantage of me, and you started to mock me and Krasuk in public? Enough, I'm not doing this anymore. And that's pride. Now, in principle, he's not necessarily wrong, but it's pride that's caused this rather than business. He hasn't done his utmost to make the fight happen, therefore. And in regards to Tyson Fury, do you guys remember I did a video called Fury Wilder 3, The Warnings of Ajax, Icarus and Hubris? And this is a video whereby boxing meets mythology and poetry. It's a very different type of series that I did with those few videos. But ultimately, the warning was that either Fury or Wilder were potentially prone to paying a big price one day for their hubris, for their arrogance, their overconfidence. And maybe that's what's happened here with Tyson Fury. He could have kept his mouth shut, and instead he ran his mouth before the fight was signed, and look at the damage that it caused. In my opinion, that is why this fight has fallen through. Whether Fury genuinely wanted the fight or not, I'll leave that to you guys to decide. But with regards to Oleksandr Usyk, he let pride take over as well. And I believe that became more important to him in that moment than making the fight. Let me know what you think, ladies and gents. Please don't forget to hit a stiff jab on the like button, a right cross on the subscribe button, and an uppercut on the notifications button. Thanks for watching. Chat to you soon. Take care. God bless.